Hello, the internet. With round one of our board game tournament, the Spring Insanity Tournament, come to a close and about to start round two. I wanted to make some commentary about some interesting things about round one. And I want to take a deep dive into the publishers, because one of the most important things about doing a board game tournament like this is learning about what you really like and being able to recognize the kinds of games and, more specifically, the kinds of publishers that you're more likely to like their games, so that if you're at, say, a board game auction and a whole bunch of games are coming up, you can almost decide how good the game's going to be for you based on just who made the game. Not always true, but there were some interesting results. Now, first of all, the breakdown of the first round, the minimum score to make it to the second round was a 16, and there were four teams that got a 16 that did not make it, three which were from the play-ins, and one was Cthulhu Flex, who lost to a 17.5. So, very competitive field this year. Of all of the people that made it through, there were only two upsets. Two 9 seeds upset the 8 teams, so 2 9s moved on, 2 8s moved on. In terms of teams getting replaced by the play-ins, only 2 6s moved on because the other 2 6s got replaced. None of the 8 9s got replaced. That was kind of interesting. We did get 1 7 replaced, so 3 made it through. 3 5s, 4s, and 3s made it through, which means 1 5, 1 4, 1 3 got replaced. All of the 1s and 2s made it through. Of the 64 games that played in the 64 tournament this year, 14 of them will not be playing in the 64 team next year. They either got relegated or removed completely. 2 games got voted out of the board game library that were playing in the 64, which was Gears and Pistons and Elysium. So those will no longer be in the tournament anymore, ever again. We did have one game that was supposed to be in the tournament. Somehow it got deleted. We played it anyways, just kind of as a playing game. It'll definitely be in the tournament next year as a decent seed, like an 11, 12 seed. The game's called Wizard Always Wins, which is a game has some functionality like Puerto Rico and San Juan, where you pick a role each round. The different roles do different things, mostly drawing cards and playing cards, and you're trying to gain levels and get your crystals into the bag, because the only role that can win the game is the wizard role, and you draw tokens from the bag equal to your level. If you draw one of your gem tokens, you win the game. If not, you're a fake wizard, and you gain nothing for that round, and you pick last the next round. So if you have any crystals in the bag, you always have a chance to win the game. Are you willing to take the chance and sacrifice short-term gains to do that? So it becomes, do I try to get myself stronger first, or do I go for the win? It's a very fun game. And if you're going to play it over and over again with a group of like 4, whoever wins has to go back to level 1. Everyone else, I'd start them at level 2. So eventually someone's going to win. And once you get to like level 3 and 4, starting like level 3 and 4, you start putting gems in. Eventually, if you got a little kid who doesn't play very well, eventually they're going to get enough of a head start that they're going to win. So it's just that's just kind of a fun home rule that I do. It's not an official rule, but it's a fun game. I got a 15.5, but it didn't move on to the next round. So there were some games from the main tournament that scored a 14 that are going to get relegated. Only 2 14s made it. That was Solar Quest and Valerian. The rest of the 14s are going to be in the play-ins next year. So the competition gets steeper. The 6 teams that Kerr2 was Galaxy Command, Lord of the Rings Confrontation, Empire Builder, Tenari, Betrayal on the House of the Hill, Time Jockey, and Storage Wars. There was also 6 teams that scored below a 14. All 6 of those are going to be in the play-ins next year. So that 6 plus 6 plus 2 is 14. So we're going to have some new blood next year. So that will make things interesting, to say the least. And there were, of course, 6 teams that from the play-ins that made it in. And just to go over who they are and who they're replacing. So if you go back to the previous videos and see, you can see the matchups. We've got Jump Drive, Rio Grande game. That is going to replace Axes and Allies. So Axes and Allies is out. And they will be going up against the Lord of the Rings the deck builder game from Cryptozoic. First Class from Z-Man is going to be replacing War of the Worlds, which would have been a big upset, 11 upset versus 6, but they didn't score enough to make it to the next round. So they get a big thumbs up, but they don't make it to the next round. And they will be going up against Legend of Drist. So they're going to, that should be a very interesting matchup. And that was from the North. In the West, we have 3 that didn't make it. We have Ticket to Ride USA that didn't make it. It'll be replaced by Niratu, who will be taking on Planet Defenders. We've got Power Grid, a very late entry, which will be replacing Elder Signs, the 3 seed. And by the way we pick this is that the highest ranked playing game replaces the highest seed that got the best seed that got knocked out. So 3 was the best seed that got knocked out. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So Power Grid was the best, so it replaces the best. Power Grid is going to go up against Castles of Burgundy, which makes me a little bit sad because I think Power Grid's going to thrash it, and I like Castles of Burgundy. I was hoping to play it more, but these things happen. These things happen, so watch out for that. And we got Newcomer Bellum Magica, which is replacing Valerian, because Valerian and Tenari both scored a 14 in the 7-10 matchup in the West, and it's going to be going up against Rick and Morty, the deck building game from Cryptozoic. So we'll see how it does. I think Rick and Morty is going to move on. And our final one comes from the East. Space Jam Monopoly did not make it through. And so it'd be going up against, so Gargoyles is going to take its place and be going up against Tourneys. That should be a very close matchup. Very close matchup. So should be a very interesting second round. I'm guaranteeing that there'll be at least one upset somewhere. There may be some big upsets. We'll see. And then the Sweet 16, there'll definitely be some big upsets. We'll see. We'll see who the first number 1 to go down is. It probably will be Titan, but we'll see. We'll see. If you got any predictions about which teams are going to upset or be upset, list them in the comments. All right, so let's move on to the power conferences. The power publishers. So I looked at the games in which companies publish them, and analyzed the publishers that had at least 3 games in the tournament. At least 3 games in the tournament. So before I do that, I give a quick honorable mention to White Wizard Games, who makes Star Realms and Hero Realms. We only had 2 game by that manufacturer, which means we probably need to buy more, in part because those are some of the top games we have. Last year they took 1 and 2. I don't think that's going to happen again. I don't think it's going to go 1 and 2. I don't think it's going to be Star Realms versus Hero Realms in the final, because right now we've got a couple that are doing a little bit better. It's going to be close. It might come down to Agricola versus some other game. It's going to be close, versus Penny Arcade. So we'll see. But we have 12 publishers that had at least 3 games. I'll also give some dishonorable mentions. A dishonorable mention to LCG, which had no games in this tournament that survived this tournament, because every time we've gotten a game from LCG and played it in a tournament this year or last year, we have hated it with a passion and have gotten rid of it. We know not to buy LCG games. Absolutely not. Did I have any others I wanted to mention that aren't already in? I don't think that. I think it was just the one honorable, one dishonorable. All right, so I'm going to talk about the bottom 3. I'm going to go bottom up. The bottom three I'm going to talk all about at once because it's basically the same company. It's all owned by the same parent company. And you can probably guess who those three are. These are typically classic games, which are kind of old. And these rankings really show how games have evolved over time. Whereas the older publishers have all fallen to the bottom and the newer publishers are all up on top. And so it's kind of an interesting statement about gaming, board gaming in general. So the bottom three, not surprisingly, from the bottom up, Hasbro, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley. Their games are classic, which is a way of saying boring. They're not great games. They're family games at best. They've been around for forever. They've printed the hell out of everything, which is why we have so many of them, because you go to a estate sale and you buy a pile of stuff, and there's almost always one or two board games from this manufacturer. I'm going to call it one sort of, that you're going to end up with. And so you're going to end up with a ton of these games, whether you want to or not. Clue, Monopoly. God, how many copies of Monopoly do we have in its different versions? I mean, we've got Looney Tunes Monopoly and Disney Monopoly and Space Jam Monopoly, which is fundamentally different than normal Monopoly. So that's what we had. And my kid loves basketball, so a little bit biased there. Hasbro was all the way on the bottom, 4 games. There was 12 total games between the three. None of them made it to the next round. 10 of the 12 will be in the play-ins next year. So there's going to be, right now, unless I buy more games, I think there's 35 games that are going to be in the play-ins next year. 10 of them come from Hasbro, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley. So, and the very worst game that we have on our list, which is Hasbro. So the average for these 3 companies was about a 13 out of 20. I guess we're pretty generous in our ranking of games, sort of. But keep in mind, the score to get to the second round was a 16. So, and we tend to call out the games that are below 13 anyway. So a lot of these games are possibly going to get cold at some point. The average rating was 80, 77, and 74 for Hasbro, Parker Brothers, Milton Bradley. 4 Hasbro, 5 Parker Brothers, 3 Milton Bradley. And so we have one Parker Brothers game that's going to be in the 64 next year, Space Jam. Milton Bradley has one game that is going to be in the round of 64 next year. That is Stratego. Other than that, the game's all just not so good. We may vote to not play them at all next year. We'll see. The next game up, which is in some ways a little surprising, in some ways not surprising, Fantasy Flight, which would have done even worse if it hadn't been the fact that we got rid of its worst game, Rune Age, which surprised me it was as bad as it is. That's probably not a manufacturer I'm going to be aggressively buying in the future. We had 3 Fantasy Flight games. The average score was a 14.8, which is decent, but that's only because it did have 1 game or 2 games that are actually going to be in the round of 64 next year. None of its games made it to the next round. 1 will be in the play-ins next year. And so just kind of a weak brand. The next one is somewhat surprising, somewhat not surprising, because it's a very, very old brand. It made games in the 70s, made bookshelf games. I'm going to give the name. Some of you might be very surprised if you're not really into board gaming. 3M. It's like, wait, don't they make like tape and Post-its? Yes. But they used to make board games. And some pretty decent board games. Their board games are kind of fun. They're not necessarily the greatest games in the world, but they're kind of fun. Some of their games are pretty decent. And that's what we had here. Their average score was a 15, so not terrible. Average ranking was a 47. We have 1 3M game that's going to be in the next round. That's Stocks and Bonds. 1 that is going to be in the plan next year, Feudal, which we've only played once. It's kind of like chess. I'm actually surprised that it didn't get a slightly higher score, but we'll see if we play it a second time if my kid likes it any better. No games so far And for any of the bottom 5 manufacturers are expected to be able to make it to the Sweet 16, though. So we think after this round, stocks and bonds run will be over. We'll see. Maybe it'll surprise. Maybe it'll do better. Maybe the other one will do worse. Never know. Moving up, this one was the shocker to me. In 7th place, breaks my heart to see this because its games underperformed this year. They're games I really like, but my kid not so much. Avalon Hill. We have 3 Avalon Hill games, which is Titan, Axis and Allies, Betrayal on the House of the Hill. By the way, for these manufacturers, I picked the original maker of the game whenever I could. If it's been reprinted, I didn't pick the reprint, so I don't give Wizards of the Coast credit for any of those games, even though they've reprinted pretty much all of them. And some of those games that we play are the reprinted versions. But I give the original manufacturer the credit. So Avalon Hill had 3 games, average score 15.5, not bad, but it could have been better. It was better last year. Average rank 42. 1 game is in the round of 32. Is going to be in the next round, which is Titan, my favorite game of all time. We do have one that is going to slip down into the play-ins next year, and that was Betrayal on the House of the Hill. Kind of a fun game, but it's not the greatest game in the world, but it is a fun game. And Titan, our one game that is still from Avalon Hill in the game, is expected to make it. It's a 1 seed, so it is expected to make it to the next round, but it might not beat the 2 seed this year. We'll see. It might, that run may come to an end at some point. We'll see. We shall see. We shall see. In 6th place is a slightly older brand. I don't think they're around anymore. Z-Man Games. This was the one that we had the most games of. We have 7 Z-Man games. And that's because when you buy a Z-Man game, you know it's going to be a decent game. It's not going to be a great game usually. It does have a couple great titles, and we do have 1 or 2 of them. It doesn't have a lot that really suck. We did have one that dropped down to a 13. It's a game I like. My kid doesn't. And that's Mondo. Of those 7, 4 of them are still in the tournament. So some solid games. But it does have a big range. 2 are going to be in the play-ins next year. And 2 of the 4 that are in the tournament are expected to make it to the next round. Now, before I give you a Power 5, I'm going to just kind of talk about the overall distribution of games. We had 93 games that survived playing through the play-ins in round 1 that have a score. Of those 93, 49 came from these top 12 manufacturers. Of the 32 games that are still in the tournament, 22 of them are from these 12 manufacturers. 16, half of the games in the tournament are from the Power 4, the top 4. Top 5 that I haven't covered yet. 15 of the games next year are going to be in the plans from these 12 manufacturers, which is all the bottom manufacturers. The top 5 have no play-in games next year. All of them are going to be in the round of 64. And our expectation is that 12 of the 16 games in the Sweet 16 are going to come from these 12 publishers, which is great considering that 2 of them are going to come from White Wizard, so that's 14. 1 of the games was too close to call, so it's going to be close. It could end up being a tie, and we'll have to figure out how to solve the tie. We have a couple ways to do that. The first way we solve a tie in later rounds is we both vote for who we thought was the better of the 2 games, and if we both vote the same, that game moves on. If not, we will either pick the higher seed, don't automatically move on, or we'll play the game again with a neutral third party and let the neutral third party decide which one they think is better, and we'll let that one go, which would probably be my wife. But we'd only do that with games we really, really like and definitely want an excuse to play them again. Why? We do this tournament as an excuse to play the games we like the most? No, yes. And as a way to weed out the weak ones. Cull the herd, if you will. Free up the shelf space. It's all about freedom nowadays. Free the shelf space. Call the shelf space Willie. Free Willie. Okay. Anyhow, moving on. The top 5. In 5th place, Wizards of the Coast, with an average score of 15.7, 3 games total in the tournament, average ranking of 37. One of those 3 is going to be in the round of 32, so the next round, but it is not expected to continue any further. That's Legend of Drist. And I'm not going to say the number of play-ins because there are none anymore. In 4th place, so we start at the Power 4. Some people dislike the more recent games that this company has made, but the older games it has made are usually pretty decent, is Ravenburger. You always know if it's a Ravenburger game, you can get it for a couple bucks, you're getting a decent game, you probably want to buy it. We've got 4 of them in the tournament with an average score of 15.75, so we're getting pretty close to the point where they're all in the next round. Of the 4, 2 of them will be in the next round, and one of those is expected to move on to the Sweet 16. In 3rd place, this one does come to a little bit biased because my kid likes the games from this particular company, and they're all pretty similar, is Days of Wonder, who makes the Ticket to Ride games. We have 4 Ticket to Ride games, and they're all separate, and they all have to do their slightly different things, so we include all 4 of them, plus they're some of my kids' favorite games. So of course, you got to put them in the tournament. Got to put all of them in the tournament. Of the 4, 3 of them are moving on to the next round. Ticket to Ride USA is the only one that did not. It won its round, but it didn't win by enough to make it, and it got replaced by a play-in. Average score 16.6, average ranking 30, which is dragged down a little bit by the Ticket to Ride USA's 40th ranking, and 2 of them are expected to make it to the Sweet 16. All right. The top 2 have all of their games moving on to the next round. And in 2nd place, if you've been following all of the videos, should not be too much of a surprise. Cryptozoic makes really great deck building games. We love our deck building games. All 4 of their games are going to move on. 3 of them are expected to move on to the Sweet 16. Their average scores is 17.25, average rank 11.75. So these games are all way up there. We love our Cryptozoic games. And in number 1, the number 1 title company that if you see games made by this company, you snatch them up. Unless you're having to pay way too much money for them, if you can get them for a good price, you snatch them up because you got a great game. Even the worst games are great. And this one is Rio Grande, who I think is gone now, but they made some great games. We have 6 Rio Grande games. We love all 6 of them. 3 of them are expected to move on to the Sweet 16. We may even see one in the final game, so stay tuned for that. Average score of a 17.3, so it's not just up there, it is way up there. The average rank, 11.3. So almost as high, a little bit higher than Cryptozoic. So between Rio Grande and Cryptozoic, we got 10 games. A few of them in the top 10, and if they're not in the top 10, they're at least in the top 20. So that's half of our top 20 is those 2 publishers. Then add in the 2 games for White Wizard and a few games here and there. You got one Z-Man game up there, and yeah, it's going to be an interesting second round. I am going to do the second round, the round of 32, in 2 videos. I'm going to do North and West together and South and East together. I should be able to do those in time, but if I'm doing these videos once per week, I'll be able to get the final video of the final week of doing that. Because I give myself enough of a head start because I have just posted the when doing this video, just recently posted the West Division, so I've got 2 more videos to post, or 3 videos to post before I have to post the second round video. So we've got a little bit of time, and 32 games for us take 5-6 weeks, so it's going to take a little bit of time here. And then the third round, the Sweet 16, will probably be done also in 2 videos because then I can do them each in a week. And then we'll do all of the Elite 8 in one video. And then all the Final 4 will be 1 video. So we got a few videos left to go. This will go through probably May, maybe into May, maybe. So stay tuned. Hopefully we'll have some really interesting results coming up, and we get to have a lot of fun playing the board games. Now that we've gotten rid of the pretenders and the not so goods and the just okays, we're just on the really goods now. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more motivation by my kid to play all the games now that we only play in the good ones, which is the reason why we do this tournament, to play the good ones. Until then, until the next time, enjoy your board games.